Hey everyone, welcome to Simblethings, a channel where I talk about living with C-PTSD, mental health issues and everything that goes along with that. So today's video is kind of a story time thing, might be a little rambly, but it's talking about the fact that I had undiagnosed autism I didn't really know until my early 30s that I was autistic. There was suspicions building up and getting more and more suspicious about it up until the point in my early 30s when I found out. But yeah, for a long time I just didn't know. Like all that time growing up, childhood, school, after school going into university, time after that, just generally out in the world, I didn't know. And there were lots of times, especially in relationships and interactions with people, where it seriously affected that. And the other thing is, one of the reasons I didn't realize is I thought I was quite disconnected and had difficulty with people getting on with them because of cultural issues and not having a kind of standard white Western upbringing. But yeah, then I realized that was on top of the fact that I'm also autistic. And then I was also unaware of the fact that how my C-PTSD was also another factor in all these interactions that I were having and problems I had in like relationships in general. So I've been wanting to do this video for a while, but it's been another one of those videos where I was like, but what's the point? How do I round this thing out into a point? And yeah, like my last video talked about, sometimes the point can just be relating the thing, right? The point can just be me talking about this kind of combination of issues where you've got undiagnosed autism, you have some cultural issues too, you also have the C-PTSD and the causes of the C-PTSD happening, and it's just quite like a whirlwind of issues all wrapped up together. And yeah, it's a lot to deal with and to unpack, and it's taken so long to really understand and to be able to sort through all these problems I've had and reasons why I've suspected I was autistic. So it's come up with people that I've been in relationships with that they've said it, and that's also been a big thing and a difficult thing to deal with, because it's when somebody says that to you, that's our whole kind of, it just sends the situation into a really other place, right? But you know the other thing, and like there is no cogent path for how I'm going to be talking about things, so I'm going to be all over the place. That's going to happen. But there's one thing that I remember talking to a friend that I'd known for years, and seen him after I'd been like actually confirmed with my diagnosis, and we were talking and stuff, and he was like, oh yeah, I thought you probably were though. And I'm like, did you want to say something? Did you want to mention it? Did you want to talk to me about it? It seemed, when he said that, it just made me think, well, did other people think the same thing? Was there all these people that I interacted with that thought / knew I was autistic but never said anything? Like, what's that about for starters? Like, that was just something that got my head, and I'm just like, yeah, so what, did everybody just know this but me? Like, is that how it was? So it got really confusing, right? And even after realizing I was autistic, then I realized that being like having a different cultural background was definitely an issue too. Like that was definitely a factor. And also the abuse I'd received in childhood, and like how that shaped interactions I had during my childhood, say in school or whatever. It's like how all these things kind of churn together And it's a lot. So there's one other person I know who also had undiagnosed autism for a lot of their life and also has C-PTSD, but they didn't have the other issue of having like a different cultural background. So that was just like this other angle almost. But even just talking to her was like, you know, very cathartic, I think, for both of us, and just being able to go, oh yeah, you've got some kind of clue of where I'm coming from. That's like, you know, it's a big deal to feel understood and like genuinely understood. Like, sympathy is one thing, but to be able to be genuinely empathetic because you fully understand, like, that's something else. But yeah, there's like one person in my life I've met that fits into that bracket, right? So it's a whole mess of stuff and it's difficult, and I think because of how difficult that is, it's made me know that even though I wanted to do this video and I thought it was an important video to do, it's just been difficult for me to do because I guess I felt like I had to unpack all that complication in a video when you can't. Like, it is, I don't know if it's enough, but it's something to just be able to relate these things, talk about some of my thoughts and feelings on those things without having to have a neat way of presenting it, because it's not neat. And that's the thing with so much like mental health stuff. Sometimes you see like psychologists or other notable people like writing articles talking about it, and there's always just the general way of that, you know, if you're writing an article, you need things to be broken down and talked about in a quite fluid way, and a way that you can have the kind of neat introduction, middle and end, and try and summarize things. And sometimes when you have these mental health conditions and you read things like that, it can feel just not right. It can feel like you're like, oh, well, elements of that resonate with me, but just the whole thing doesn't feel right, because there's this need to, and like whether this is a video or an article or whatever, there's a need to be able to explain, unpack and summarize in this very neat way, which is just not possible really with a lot of mental health issues, pretty much all of them. There's messiness whichever way you slice it. Like, there's messiness. I almost think that needs to be a separate video, which it might be, but bleh. Aside from that, there's always messiness when you try and lay it out. So I'm just accepting this messiness more now, and just accepting the fact that I can just talk about something and just relate it and be like, yeah, that's something, right? Just on top of trying to unpack the abuse you've undergone through childhood when you're as an adult, you're in your mid, late 20s or whatever, and you're really starting to unpack and you feel like you're getting on top of that. But there's all this other stuff that you feel like you haven't dealt with, but then you feel like you have dealt with things. You know what it was? It was the fact that I was autistic as well. And it was actually, you know, it was also the fact that you just have to recognize some things are just gonna stay, they're just gonna be that. That's how it is, and you kind of have to live with it, right? It's that whole thing about like managing expectations. There has to be a certain level of managing your expectations if you have a serious mental health condition. Is, you know, the fact that I can live life mostly well and mostly like an average person, like I can you know, in terms of working life and going out and doing things, when you're able to do things and go out, generally that's all okay for me. And when you realize that having it generally okay is a really big achievement, like, does it bring you down because you have to bring your expectations and lower your expectations? Yeah, but it's also liberating in its own way, right? Because it helps you just feel like, oh, actually, I've achieved. I've actually achieved. So yeah, it's always like just this whole mess of trying to explain complex issues and trying to lay them out in a video in a kind of neat way. And sometimes I guess when you have very small, thin threads of topics and then you can really zero in, it's easier to do that. But when you're just talking about a whole big thing, it's not possible to do that. It's really hard, so don't. You don't have to. You don't have to be able to unpack everything in a very neat take-home summary, because life isn't like that, and for sure life with mental health conditions isn't like that. So whilst there's probably so many other things on this topic that I could talk about, I'm not going to do it right now. I'll probably do that in a separate video. But I'm just going to leave you with this all around. You know how it goes. So for everybody watching, I really appreciate it. Super appreciate comments, likes, subs, all of that kind of stuff. Remember, there is help out there. I'll put a link to the C-PTSD Foundation in the description below. And until next time, peace.